Welcome to Rethink Community Podcast, brought to you by Think Tank, Inc. I'm your host, John White. For the last 10 years, Think Tank has been helping people and organizations step into the stories of those who face poverty every day. We believe that stories have the power to break through our opinions and positions and bring us together. On this podcast, we bring you real stories from real people who have grappled with poverty, faced obstacles, blazed new trails, and forged unlikely relationships. It was Martin Luther King Jr. who first observed that it was a tragedy of our nation that at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in America. Most churches today might say they would like to be more diverse, but Champion City Church in Springfield, Ohio, took that wish to a very different level when they merged two congregations together. Today, we will hear their story from two of their pastors, Bruce Willmann and Jason Channels. Welcome, Bruce and Jason.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Terrific. This is going to be a great one. And you guys know each other pretty well, and I want to get to know you just a little bit better. What are two words that would describe each other? Or two words?
Let's see. To describe each other?
Yeah.
Let's see. If I'm a brother.
Or for you, for Bruce.
For Bruce, I would say crybaby. No, just
That's true.
No, but I would say compassionate. Very, very compassionate.
Compassion.
He's got a big heart for just
Excellent.
everyone. So compassionate, and then the second word will be tenacious.
Okay.
Once he sets his mind to do something, it's going to get done. Just grabs hold of stuff and will not let go. I think somebody described him as a Jack Russell Terrier one time.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. Take that, Bruce. Okay.
That was offensive, yes.
Yes.
But that's true. Someone did tell me that. So for Jason, I would say quiet strength. There is just a steadiness to him. He's not, there's no show. He's just quiet, steady, but he is one of the strongest people that I've ever met. Like,
That's
he
great.
just carries himself with authority, but he doesn't have to be loud. He doesn't have to be, he shows up and he's got authority.
That's
People
great.
know it.
That's great. We need a lot of that today.
Thank you.
In our culture. So walk us through what happened, that magic that happened in 2016. Describe, your congregations and up to that point, and what sparked the beginning of this whole process for both of you to bring these two congregations together.
Yeah. So it was, let's see, going into 2015, actually, in 2014, I had actually started or founded a church called Uniting Faith Church in 2010. So for about 5 years, I was, pastoring a predominantly African-American church, which was never my intention. When, the Lord gave me the vision for Uniting Faith Church, it was based out of Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 through 13, where it talks about these gifts that Christ gave the church, and those gifts were to, bring about a unifying, of the body of Christ. And so that word unity just struck a chord with me, and that was the vision that I had for the church in general, just tearing down the walls, unifying the body racially, culturally, social, economically, even denominationally. I was, wanted to go after denominational walls and see those walls torn down. And so that was the vision that I had, but was, finding myself unsuccessful in it, no matter how hard I tried, in and of myself, from, trying to diversify the style of worship and, to possibly be an attraction to to other races, specifically, the Caucasian race or white American race, and just wasn't happening. So let's see, through that process, and just kind of waiting and praying and just believing that God was going to do something. I had received a invite from Jeff Pinkleton of the Gathering to be part of this kind of network of pastors. We call ourselves the B team, not the A team, but the B team. And we were gathering, and Bruce happened to be part of that group, and so that's how we met and began to associate and with one another. And then I extended an inquiry about their New Year's Eve service of 2014, and because our church from time to time would go and fellowship with other churches for that New Year's Eve service going into the new year, and asked if we can come through and fellowship with them, and we did, and that night was kind of like a spark for me, it's in regards to just my love for him, the ministry there at Champion City Vineyard. It was just like, wow, this is good. This is
New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve, 2014. I was like, man, this is, I like the feel here. Just so much love, and just I felt acceptance. And so we had fellowship that New Year's Eve, but then kind of went on our separate ways. We still met, with the pastors group from time to time, and would say, hey, but they think it's going to go anything further than that, but maybe coming together for a service here and there, now and then, and around the same time, God is stirring His heart and doing some things, and I received a word from one of the ministers at my church. She had a vision, and come to me at the church and said, Pastor Jason, I see pastors coming to you asking, can they merge with us? And I was like, that's like, wow, okay, thank you, Lord, because my wife and I kind of been praying along those lines, again, just trying to go after that whole idea of unity and the body of Christ coming together and becoming one. And then Bruce, you want to take it from there regardless of what's going on with you?
So my wife and I moved to Springfield in 1999 to start the church. Okay. And we had read all the books on all the things to do to start a church and have it be successful. And the Lord wouldn't let us do any of those things. Like, you're supposed to put your church in the growing part of town. Sure. You're supposed to do all the proper things. And
that's textbook, right?
We did none of them. We planted our church downtown, and we met downtown for 19 years till last year when we bought a building. And we really felt from the very beginning that God was calling us to do something that looked different, to do something that was racially diverse. I began challenging our congregation sometime around 2010. The verses from Revelation just stood out to me, like, heaven is going to be every tongue and tribe and nation coming together to worship God forever. Mm-hmm. And our church didn't look like that. And so I began just challenging our predominantly white church that we're going to be a minority forever in heaven, because the church is growing in Africa and South America and Asia by leaps and bounds. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. And the church is really stagnant in the U.S. and Europe. And so just statistically, the numbers of people that are going to be in heaven that are not going to look like us is going to be vast. And so we need to practice. We need to get used to that. We need to figure out a way to become a more diverse congregation. And we were probably 85% white or so. In 2014 when I met Jason, he touched on New Year's Eve of 2014 going into 2015 and us coming together. And it was so fascinating. We had just met like 4 months before that. Mm-hmm. But my daughter was home. She was a senior in college, and she came in that night, and she's like, Mrs. Channels? and looked at his wife, and they started to talk. When my daughter was in 3rd grade, his wife was the class aide. And so it was like, oh, okay, this is fascinating that there was this connection 15 years or like 14, 15 years before that we didn't even.
Seeds were planted.
Yeah.
Way before.
And so we didn't know that was going to be part of a story years later. And so we just began to, like we built this relationship with one another and just connected, and it was really beautiful. But as he said, like we were kind of, he's pastoring his church, I'm pastoring mine, and we would come together once a month for this pastors group and meet with them. But there was something about that connection. Yes. And that summer, I was at at the time our church was part of the Vineyard, and I was at our national conference, and the sermon was by Dr. Charles Montgomery on a Thursday morning, and he preached on a church without walls. What's it look like to build a church without walls? And how Christ came to tear down the walls that divide us. And he said I'm a crybaby, and I was so moved, like I couldn't stop weeping over what the church could look like if we could figure out a way to tear down those walls.
That's great.
And so I sent him the link. I said, tell me what you think about this. And there was a lot going on. My wife and I were on vacation for a couple weeks for our anniversary, and his dad was in the hospital, and we just kind of had to put it on hold. It was probably 5 or 6 weeks before we got together. And I actually, the time we could figure out was on a Wednesday night. He's like, we have Bible study. Why don't you come over afterwards? And I came to their Bible study. I got there at the beginning. He's like, oh, you came early. I'm like, yeah. And there was something so reminiscent to when I was a brand new Christian and attending this church, this Pentecostal church in Dayton, and they were singing the exact same songs that I had sung 30 years before in this church. And I'm like, oh, and I would start to sing, and he'd be like, oh, you know this? And it was amazing how we come from vastly different backgrounds, and yet we have commonalities that run really deep. Right. And there was something, like, even in that moment, like, oh, I didn't expect that. Like, he was looking at me like, I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
And so we began this conversation afterwards just about the sermon and how it moved us. And I said, listen, I don't really even have permission to do this, but what would you think about our churches merging together? And he's like, well, we'll pray about that. And within 5 days, we made this decision. Like, I reached out to my elders and said, hey, so I did something. And being
like, excuse me, right?
Yeah. I was like, hey, I just need to let you up. I'm going to apologize for something that I just did, And it was, but it was, everyone was quickly on board. Like, yes, this is our heart. We want to see walls torn down in our city. We want to see walls torn down in the church.
But were there misgivings, or was there fears? Was there? You're two guys that had trust. Had some deep, understood your deep commonality, which we all do if we just sit back and reflect. Mm-hmm. We all are connected. Yes. But so you had set this stage, but you got a flock of people that come from a lot of different angles and philosophies and tolerance and lack of acceptance. Right? How'd you work through that?
Oh yeah, definitely some trying times there, misunderstandings. I remember, we tried to do the best we could to eliminate fears and bring about some encouragement. One Sunday morning, I had Bruce come, attend our service, and he actually, before he merged, and he actually addressed the congregation and had some Q&A, allowed them to ask him questions in regards to his background, the church organization that he was a part of, at that time, which was Vineyard, so yeah, he was, on the hot seat.
I was on the
there.
hot seat for sure.
Good questions asked, but there were definitely some legitimate fears and worries. I think one of the major ones, coming from predominantly African American church, and a church background, to where I literally heard this statement, coming up in the church that I grew up in, was that anything with two heads is a freak. Referring to the pastor, one pastor having the absolute authority, within, under God, of course, God being the ultimate authority, but under him, it was the pastor. There's only one pastor in the church, and anything with two heads is a freak.
Right,
and
right.
So, just that whole idea of shared power, shared responsibility. Some people they couldn't grasp that, So even in my congregation, it was, I think there was some questions in regards to, okay, so who are we calling pastor? Whose voice do we listen to? And just some fears about, responding and respecting another voice other than that of this African American pastor. As I said before, it was never my intention to have an all black church. And I would talk about how even that idea, that terminology, black church, white church, just made me cringe. It just really, it irked me. I just could not understand the division and wanted no part of that division. And so, but because I am, an African American man, at the head of this church, the people that I tend to draw by relationship, we were other African American people. And so there was just there's that comfort level there, that's hard to break. And so those are.
Well, did you both have some hard conversations of your congregation?
I think our congregation was a much easier sell.
Why is that?
I think it was easier for them to
predominantly white
white church. But so one of the things we've worked really hard at for the past 10 or 12 years is diversity of thought in our church. So even like politically, we've got conservatives and progressives and libertarians and everything in between within our church. And so we're not, even though we're homogenous racially, we're not homogenous in thought. Like we have diversity within unity, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So that's one of the things that we've worked really hard at, is to strike a balance theologically, politically. Like in our current elder team, we could look and say, we don't necessarily agree about this one issue theologically, but that's okay.
Right.
That's not found in many churches. Like these are our belief systems, and they're pretty narrow. This is what we believe, and you all have to believe this, or you can't lead here. Right. And we've been very careful to craft something that does have diversity of thought.
Wow. And it sounds like there's a richness here of diversity that was beginning to meld together.
That's
Is it richness? Of diversity? Is that just a politically correct word, or is that it actually can happen?
We're seeing more of it. I mean, it's taken a long time. This has been 5 years, and we are nowhere near where we want to be. I would say we're still a predominantly white church. Yes. Even merging an African American church into our congregation, we're still a predominantly white church. And that's not our heart. And I think what we're seeing, though, is real discussions on how to do this. The first 2 years, we were really just trying to figure out how to even do Sunday morning. I think we still are asking some of those questions, but I think we've figured the Sunday out on what does Sunday look like. But now we're asking more difficult questions about what does Monday through Saturday look like.
Right. Oh, I see.
How do we because church is not just inside the building, it is our daily lives. Yeah. And so what does it look like then for us to model to our congregation, this is what it looks like to have friends who look different than you do and believe differently than you do.
Wow.
And that it's been
Jason?
It's been beautiful, but really hard.
Definitely. Likewise, just going from just surface or the aesthetics of what things look like within the church. So we've tried to address those issues. Starting off, of course, there are cultural differences, and like I said, just some of the
Worship,
worship styles and the type of music. I remember one of the saints from my church, congregation from my church. She didn't make the transition, and one of the comments she made when we went to visit them on New Year's Eve of 2014 was. This is a little too country for me in regards to the style of music, and I'm like, okay, you got your taste, that's your opinion.
But don't we need to have a sense of humor with some of this? Don't take ourselves so seriously about our work, about our stuff.
Right. We have to get beyond that, and so me being a musician, I actually play the drums myself. I grew up, playing the drums. So me being a musician, I have an appreciation for every style of music, and could just go with whatever. One day I can get into classical and opera. And I remember visiting Door County, Wisconsin, with my wife for an anniversary, and they had the outdoor opera houses, and just listening to this young lady. Singing opera was just sending, chills at my spine. I'm like, oh, and my wife was looking at me like, really, but because I'm a musician,
Well, to that person that couldn't make the transition, and we honor her and so forth. But are there others that did make the transition and that had breakthroughs, in their own spiritual life, and breakthroughs about our neighbor and the other person in our community that we don't associate with?
Right. Yeah. No doubt about it. The few, and I would say the few that did make the transition and stay with it. I'm seeing breakthrough happen in their lives, in relationships. We had an elders meeting last night where one of the elders was referring to my sister, my blood, natural sister. And the relationship that they have, and how he called upon her to serve in church for prayer, and how she said I'll do it for you, Papa Kenny. We're referring to him as Papa, and I'm like, wow, this is a white man, and so just seeing those relationships build and walls come down for those that have stayed the course and see something, that are in this for something bigger than themselves. Definitely seeing some breakthrough.
Now, what are people from the outside? They're looking in at you two, because this isn't supposed to happen, right? This isn't. These are very unlikely things, unlikely relationships. And what do you see from those people that are looking on the side? And what's going on with those two congregations? Do they like it? Do they run from it?
So I would say that in the beginning, we actually had quite a few people show up at our church because they were they wanted to see this thing that was happening. And what was so fascinating is it was almost all white people. And so while we were trying to become more diverse, we actually became more white in the process of that. But it was people that were like, this is something we want to be a part of. And it was beautiful to see. So there have been quite a few. I think a lot of people look at it and they're not sure what to make of us.
Right.
Like there is that's kind of odd over there. We don't know about them.
Yes. So and finally, I want to ask you this last question. There might be some people listening who may not be a pastor, but want to be part of building real bridges with people from different backgrounds or ethnicities from them, whether it's their organizations or just in their communities as a neighbor. What advice would you give those folks that are listening that want to break out, or how they want to break out of their cul-de-sac, or figuratively they want to break out of their bubble? They want to their life is maybe is stale or stuck, and they want something more meaningful.
Yeah.
What would you advise them to do?
Sure. Well, there were three keys points that Dr. Charles Montgomery made in this sermon that really struck with us, and that we try to put in practice there. At the church, in regards to having this house without walls. Number one, he talked about personal proximity. How we have we can't be afraid to come into close proximity with those who are different with us, those that look different, sound different, different cultures, ethnicities. We have to have this personal proximity with one another to tear down those walls and really build relationship. As we said, we wanted to go beyond just having a multicultural, multi-ethnic Sunday morning service, but really have racial reconciliation take place, and that's not going to take place without relationship with one another. So personal proximity, talked about having serious conversations about power, relinquishing some power,
because the predominant
yeah
culture has had all the power.
Yeah.
Right.
Even when we first merged, we still had the power. Like Jason, we had 2 campuses at the time, and Jason was considered the campus pastor of the downtown campus. And we soon recognized that's not sharing power. And now we're led by a senior leadership team, and there are 5 of us, and 2 African American and 3 white, 3 men, 2 women, trying to get a better reflection of our church body in the leadership. And so there's way more shared power.
Right.
Like my wife and I are, for a year, we were the pastors of the church, but we had pastors under us. Now we are 5 people leading together.
Yeah.
Because we had to give away power to say this is the only way this is going to work in the world.
Yeah. And power, shared power, it can be really an enigma, if I use that word, for I'd say predominantly white folks. It's something they haven't been able to understand because perhaps they've always had a lot of power within the culture. And for us to step back and say power is releasing that power intentionally in our lives, and day by day, especially with those that receive us as with all the power. That's a real spiritual discipline, is it not, Pastor?
Oh yes.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. That's when you talk about just the love of Christ, him saying, by this shall all men know that you're my disciples, by your love one for another, and he had, done, he had made that statement after he, being, God incarnate, the Son of the living God, Lord of all, takes, an apron, and wraps around his waist and gets down, on his, knees to wash the feet of his disciples. That's serving, and
you guys aren't done yet, right?
No.
You're not done yet. You're still a project. You're still a work in process.
100% still a work in process.
Is that part of the development, the spiritual development
of
your congregation, yourselves, and as the community observes you, you're a beacon of hopefully a beacon of hope and possibility. The possibility of what can happen when the body of Christ begins to look at the walls that they haven't seen before and begin to systematically tear those down, gently, of course, right?
Yeah.
Over time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm preaching myself here a little bit. So I really appreciate you guys being here. And I appreciate your masks. I hope it doesn't impede our podcast here at Think Tank. We're still observing that, and here it is, Election Day, 2020, and we have you two in the audience. Sharing your heart and lives, and that's certainly symbolic of what the movement that I know you want to be a part of are doing and advancing, as well as Think Tank. So I appreciate you guys being here.
Thanks so much, John, for having us.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, John.
This has been the Rethink Community Podcast, brought to you by Think Tank Inc., with music by Elijah Hamilton. Don't forget to subscribe to hear upcoming episodes featuring the stories of other courageous individuals we think you should know. And if you are part of an organization that would like to be better equipped to serve people in poverty, be sure to check out the resources we offer, including the Cost of Poverty Experience, or COPE, at thinktank-inc.org/COPE. Join the hundreds of businesses, schools, colleges, churches, and healthcare providers that have used the Cost of Poverty Experience, along with our other suite of tools and coaching to find new ways of thinking and responding to poverty.